Namaskar. Welcome to Daily Global Insights, episode 163. I'm Sri Iyer, and joining me as always is Sridhar Chityalaji. Thank God it's Friday. It's our goal to cover the top 20 news items of the day in 20 minutes. Here we go. In US news, Republican bill aims to restrict critical race theory from schools. Some say it wants to ban critical race theory from schools, workplace, military, and while the Republicans are taking that stand, the AMA supports critical race theory. Sir, we have discussed this at length previously in one of the hangouts. What chance do the Republicans have of passing this bill, sir?
The Republicans probably don't have the votes to get this passed because they have to prioritize. But as a symbol of defiance, they're going to introduce the bill and put it to vote. It may become all even Stevens, and then obviously Miss Harris will do the filibuster. But what's happening is very clear that, as is the case that's going on, you're going to have Republican states passing bills which will ban in their respective states whatever the Biden is trying to get passed, or the Democrats are trying to get passed in the House and the Senate. That's just what is going to happen. And then you're going to have some of the institutions like American Medical Association, which is officially announced that its association supports the critical race theory, and they use the word equality rather than meritocracy.
Interesting. And viewers, please stay through this hangout. We have got some big reveals coming as we progress in giving you the news. White House, end in sight in gas disruptions after Colonial Pipeline resumes operations. A Canadian oil company defies Michigan governor order to shut oil pipeline. So this is a side story that is started now, isn't it?
The side story that has started is, that there is a major pipeline which is owned by the Canadians and operated by the Canadians. And that particular, I think it's called as the Enbridge pipeline, which runs from Michigan right across. The Michigan governor, has made the comment that it's a sitting time bomb, going through Lake Michigan and needs to be shut down. Whereas the company has stated, given the present circumstances of energy shortages, it is not prepared to shut the specific pipeline down. So there's nothing that one can do. You can bring federal agencies and so on, but you're not going to shut it down if the company refuses to do so in the given circumstances, which is namely that there is a significant shortage and rising prices.
In all these things, Democratic governors want to do things a certain way. Republican governors want to do certain things a certain way. Almost every one of these things is along partisan lines. What happened to governance, sir?
The governance is determined by the present prevailing dictum in the United States: who has the might has the right to do what they want to do. It is about their respective policies and asserting the policies. So this new green journey that they are embarking on is all about anything that is going to cause disruption to this green theory, namely emission controls and upsetting the ecosystem and potential calamity to the populations. Now, this has always been contested by the Republicans. We have seen that from Keystone Pipeline to the Alaskan oil fields to the reserves in that region. Everywhere you have seen contention. And what you're now seeing is a far more forthright approach, because you have a president, who is in limbo, and you have a progressive regime which is running the administration. That is one of the reasons why you have this major problem. There's no leadership because the leadership is fragmented. Even from the president's side, you will soon see that one of the ex-Republican ex-Republican treasurers or secretaries secretary making the comment, ex-secretary making the comment, who is running United States.
Yes, indeed. That's the reveal that I was referring to. In fact, we are going to gloat over it because we were the first ones to perhaps go online and say this thing out loud. America under siege under Biden watch as cyber attack gains momentum. Colonial Pipeline, Florida water treatment plant, hospital IT systems, VPN network gap in the defense, and the solar winds hack. This doesn't seem to stop. It is just coming out of the woodworks. Sir, what is now the plan? I mean, US now is vulnerable for close to 6 to 9 months now since we've been hearing all these attacks coming across. Where do we stand now? Is there a concentrated or a cogent policy that the Biden administration is coming up with to tackle all these things, sir?
I think that they're coming up with a plan, basically to detect, search, detect, and apply appropriate punishment, which could be ban, which could be enforcement, which could be specific type of measures, very similar to what you'd see apply across countries like Iran and so on, going after the officials and going after the people, and imposing severe types of sanctions. So that's one part of the enforcement process in terms of what Biden administration is trying to do. The second is they're also enhancing, probably allocating capital to make sure that there is a very defined cyber policy in terms of tracking and much more on a monitoring on a preemptive basis. Right now, we are in a reactionary mode rather than in a preemptive mode. One would assume that we would have already gone into the situation of being proactive and preemptive and having deterrent measures in place, but that doesn't seem to be the case. In the meanwhile, the lawmakers are saying that if some of the states are very passive, because if it happens to be, for example, you have seen, in the case of Israel, right? So you have some organizations, you have people within Democratic Party supporting the Palestinians and Hamas, and then you have members within the within the U.S. administration, within the Democratic Party supporting Israel. Now, if this kind of what you call dichotomy or dissent slips into states, then states could have a problem in terms of enforcement. So the lawmakers are introducing bill also to support local and state governments, both from a funding point of view, tracking, monitoring, as well as enforcement, just in case there is any deterrent. These are the two set of actions that have been announced yesterday in terms of response to this cyber attack.
Now, the cyber security executive order that Biden has signed, hopefully this has some teeth in it. And we also need to understand, I think this is more for the lawmakers of the United States, the congressmen and women, at least for 24 hours, looks like Iron Ladies, Nancy Pearl has put a kibosh on some of the loudmouths from certain sections of the Democratic Party. I shall not name them beyond this. Republican states progressively roll out anti-Biden policies, with Florida and Texas leading the state. Sir, I have a problem with this. I think you need to look at what is good for the country first. We can take partisan line, but I think before that the country's interests come. I don't know what are the laws. Perhaps you can expand this for me. Shouldn't be opposing it just because it is anti-Biden.
No, I think it's a principal issue around its policy. For example, gun control. Some of the states are going to oppose the gun control laws and some of the specific implementations that the Democrats have in mind, which they're passing through executive order. Number one. Number two, they're going to take positions specifically around the critical race theory. We have alluded to that. We just talked about it. That's number two. The third is this whole thing around mandatory vaccination. So states are going to say, we're not going to mandate everybody to have vaccines, though we would recommend people having vaccines. That's number three. Especially so when you have more and more, complaints. Today, we have had complaints that the Pfizer vaccine has some, clots and consequences. Moderna has had this issue. J&J has had this issue. AstraZeneca, we don't use that much, has had this issue. So you're going to see this policy difference between the two. So that's third. Fourth, it's already established that many people are not coming back to work, which is acknowledged by Biden because of this unemployment policy and unemployment benefits that is getting rolled out. So you are going to see Republican states basically saying, we are not going to give unemployment benefits unless you qualify to a specific threshold, and people have to better get back to work. So these are the subtle differences, and you're also going to find differences in the environmental policy, emission control policy, green accords. So what you are seeing is that wherever you have had a 180-degree shift in policy, you're going to see the Republican states quite vehemently oppose it, because that's been what they have been following thus far.
And this next piece of news item, remember we said it first here several weeks ago. Richard Grenell, who served in Trump administration, blasts Susan Rice for acting as shadow president for a weak Biden. Sir, you've been proved right again.
Well, when you look at some of the flip-flops that happen from a policy point of view, one has to guess that that something is fundamentally wrong. The fact that Richard Grenell, who was in the National Intelligence Agency in the Trump administration, to come out have blasted Susan Rice for saying, "Hey, you are really pushing out orders or pushing out policies, almost acting as a shadow president." It's not good for the country, but Biden appears to be quite weak. It appears to be also don't know what his relative state of health is, but you're beginning to see contradictory policies. The other thing that we have also been stating is that this looks very much like Obama administration. We talked about Susan Hennessy yesterday. Many members of the Biden administration are very much the surrogates and of the old Obama administration. And some of these policies that are getting rolled out seems to push United States into much more. Look at the policy of, push the policies into confrontation. Look at the inconsistencies. We have a West Asia peace accord, and then we have a problem. We have an Iranian negotiation, we have a problem. Then you have the issue in Syria, Iraq, we have a problem. You have a issue you have a pullback in Afghanistan, we have a problem. So we are beginning to see a whole raft of policy inconsistencies, or trying to reset the policies to the old Obama administration, that is creating problematic situation for United States, which begs the question, is this Biden or is this someone else running the show?
So if this is what's going to happen in United States, then what moral right does United States have commenting on other systems and other democracies across the world?
This is geopolitics. So, you try to preach values that you don't follow. So that's just a common theme.
So it's not necessary that you have to preach. You have to practice what you preach.
Well, it's not the case, right? So I think that's geopolitics. So that's what, unfortunately, you support a dictator on one side, then you go and talk about democracy on the other side. So this has been geopolitics. So we can't win this one.
And in Indian news, after our sessions, India announces its vaccine program, including the roadmap for 2 billion vaccines. Many Indian homegrown vaccines are now going to be made available. Now, you heard it first here. In one day, we had 2 different sessions where we stressed the need for open communication, a roadmap on part of the government of India for their vaccination plan. And I think they have delivered. We are going to give you some more data as this thing comes along. So your thoughts?
My thoughts are, I think it's a pretty good plan. In fact, some of the words that is spelled out, there's a big video presentation that has been given. Some of the things that is spelled out lays out the principles that we have laid out. The principles that we have laid out is, okay, everybody is talking about oxygen shortage. Talk about oxygen shortage. Do we have enough? Well, they seems to have responded to that. Then we have talked about the vaccination. We have only 178 million people vaccinated. Doesn't seems to be enough supply, enough vaccines ordered, plus enough backdrop or backup that is built out. So does India have a roadmap in terms of vaccinating the people? So I think the health ministry has clearly laid out. In fact, there's a whole series of mini paper that we have put out, which lists various things that is at work. What's happening is the Indian government is doing a lot of a piecemeal announcement and communication. There is not an integrated set of data that says, what are the various things, not just purely vaccines, oxygen, the ecosystem that surrounds it, what some of the complications that come out of it, like the fungus infection that has been noticed, what is the specific medication that they have come up with from a treatment point of view, what some of the tablets and pills that they are trying to use, very similar to hydroxychloroquine. So there is a fairly detailed plan that they have worked out. But what is most refreshing is there's close to 2 billion vaccines that have been announced on the 2 billion from a supply point of view, and this is expected to be availed by Indian government between August and December. So if they can get access to these 2 billion vaccines, they've given the numbers. They're ramping up the production of Covaxin and Covishield to about 178 million per month from August. Sputnik is going to come into play, and there's other set of vaccines which are locally manufactured in India that is listed, that we will share, that you can see in the diagram. And that means that India has got a pretty good ecosystem coming. There is pain, there is suffering, nothing is achieved overnight. All these things take a bit of time.
And I have the COVID numbers here on the screen now. First off, let's take a look at, since you mentioned this, we'll go back to the other thing later, sir. But first, let us take a look at the world numbers. We have at US, we have 33.586 million total cases. And the number of, I'm trying to read, the number of serious critical is at 8,707. Active cases are 6.368 million and so on. So, but if you look at this whole thing, India still, per million, India is still one of the lowest.
Well, I think this is the contention. The contention is when you look at the India numbers, India has performed relatively well compared to the other countries. There are two theories which basically try to argue against this. One is whether the numbers are understated. Now, this we have tried to validate the numbers to the extent possible. What we are hearing is that some of these death numbers are directly collated from deaths reported in some of the morgues and graveyards and so on and so forth. So there is to some extent validity in the numbers that is being presented. For example, if you take the case of India, the number of deaths that is reported is 256,000,
Right.
258,000 or 260,000.
Right.
If you take the case of the number of people who have discharged is close to about close to 20 million people have been recovered. Recovery is close to about 14 million people 20 million people on a total of 23 million. Still, the outstanding number is pretty high. Those who are getting hospital treated is about 3.7 million. But it's coming down. We discussed these numbers. The point that we're trying to make amongst the top 10 countries here, when you take a look at the relative population of these countries, India stands out as the country with the largest population, but seems to be doing relatively well given the size of the country plus the state of the development of the infrastructure. Yes, the wave 2, they underestimated the intensity of the wave and the transmissibility of the wave 2. But again, all the countries are dealing with this issue. The third largest economy, namely Japan, which you don't find here, again, we discussed it yesterday, is still short of vaccines. They still haven't got a full-fledged vaccination program being rolled out, and they have Olympics that is awaited. Look at some of the other countries' numbers when you get time. But the reason we wanted to point out is these are not small numbers. United States is 600,000. India is about 260,000. Look at Brazil, is 428,000. France is more than 107,000 when you look at the population in terms of deaths. When you look at Russia, it's about 115,000. When you look at UK, it's about 127,000. When you look at Italy, it's about 123,000 deaths. These are big numbers on a relatively small population compared to India.
That's true, sir. Thank you very much for sharing those things. And once dismissed as something that's not going to work out, Indian Railways Oxygen Express has emerged as a key part of the medical oxygen supply chain. Over 100 oxygen expresses have delivered 6,260 tons of liquid oxygen. Sir, in fact, rail is the most safest way to transport liquid oxygen, isn't it?
They are. Indian Railways has pretty much moved anything and everything from people to army to tractors to cars to anything that you can think of. It has moved it around the country from point to point, whether it is east to west or from north to south. It's done a commendable job. But what is important to point out that it has now become an important part of the cogwheel in the medical oxygen supply chain. So therefore, it's fairly well anchored. I think one of the things that I'm a little disappointed about is that, which again we touched on yesterday in our session, is namely that they built a fantastic set of temporary hospitals in converting the railway coaches. My view is they should have continued, and probably they should retool it and keep it maybe for another 2 to 3 years to see what happens with various variants that are likely to come out, and just begin to enhance it around various parts of the country. Because you have south, you have southern. I don't know. I mean, you have southern railway, northern railway, you have eastern railway, you have the south central railway, then you have the western railway. So when you have various kind of zone-wise, sub-zone-wise rail infrastructure, and clearly the rail infrastructure should be leveraged. In the good old days when I used to be a young man or a young fellow, there used to be railway hospitals attached to many, many, many medium to small stations. I don't know whether they exist today, but the rail infrastructure that also needs to be further enhanced to deal with a crisis like this. You have railway hospitals, you have military hospitals. So I
Go
think
ahead, sir.
that the railway infrastructure, in summary, the railway infrastructure should be leveraged. It clearly has become one of the logistical important cogwheels in the value chain of the medical delivery process.
And other news, Sterlite plant in Tuticorin dispatches first batch of liquid oxygen. Ethereum founder Vitalik Buterin donates 1 billion in cryptocurrency for India COVID battle. Wow. Even if it is Bitcoin, it's still $1 billion, isn't it, sir?
Well, firstly, I think delighted to see the controversial and political, banana Sterlite plant back in action and doing some terrific work with first batches of oxygen. I think they've also got a deal with the Karnataka government where they plan to propose to establish a liquid oxygen plant. In terms of Ethereum, I mean, we discussed about the Bitcoin. He probably said, "Here's one Bitcoin. I'm giving you $1 billion." Redeemable, it is. You can probably redeem it in one of the Ethereum exchanges, and one coin, and you have got your $1 billion. Transfer the money to either PM Cares Fund or wherever he is transferring it to, and up he goes. So you have now found your way in. Is this for Bitcoin? Does the Bitcoin have a non-profit dispensation mechanism? Is it simple, efficient, and easy to distribute model rather than using your $9.95 using a credit card, bank account, so on and so forth? You transfer a Bitcoin and then they go and redeem it from the appropriate exchanges, and the money is in the account. So I think firstly I congratulate Vitalik to have done. He has tweeted. So highly commendable charitable effort by him.
And the Yogi government in Uttar Pradesh is going to ramp up its pediatric ICU in districts and build medical infrastructure. I think these are all preparations for a possible third wave, isn't it, sir?
I think sometimes a crisis gives the opportunity for a country to augment what it should have done as a natural course of evolution of the ecosystem, which they haven't. but now it has given the opportunity for putting the money to work.
And in global news, Israel-Palestinian clashes rattles the West Asia peace deal and the Biden foreign policy under threat. Clashes spread from Israel to Temple Mount to Chicago. Now, Chicago is a surprise, sir. Why do we say that the riots have spread to Chicago?
I state that it has spread to Chicago basically because there's big protests yesterday in Chicago. We saw the day before yesterday in New York, not as big as what one observed, many supporting the Palestinian cause. And of course, there's also the pro-Israeli supporters supporting it. There was definitely clashes here in New York. As far as the West Asia peace deal is concerned, it must be these clashes between Israel and the Hamas is definitely creating some rumbles, and thus far it has not, teetoed into the rest of the countries, but it could easily, backfire and spin out of control. So the whole foreign policy foreign policy attempts by Biden, could be coming under threat. This is one of the areas where we have a problem. If you recall that we had talked about $125 million of COVID money being sent to the Palestinian territories. So it's almost like flagging, we are supporting, we believe that, we need to be supporting your cause. This in conjunction with this sudden relaxation in the Iran policy and then attempting to bring Iran to the table when all the time the world was talking about minimum conditions, preconditions of the terms of the United Nations of sanctions being met around enrichment of uranium, around development of nuclear capabilities. You find that these two policies suddenly is beginning to ratchet up some of the issues that can rapidly spread. And we have also discussed about some of the incursions and some of the challenges that the Iranian little gunboats have posed to U.S. ships in Straits of Hormuz and in the upper Indian Ocean.
And John Kerry denies sharing Israel operations with Iran. Remember, we also talked about this a week or two ago. It seemed to have died down then, but now it has raised its ugly head again, sir.
Well, I think that there's a continuous saga in terms of making sure that he's called to action because it's quite a serious offense. John Kerry continues to deny that he has shared any Israeli operations with Iranians. There's a little bit of a political bickering by the Republicans. They should have put this issue to rest, given the inflammable situation that we are in. But anyway, be it as it may, this is propped up. It continues to deny until there is some kind of an investigation. And because there was a leak of the recordings, the voice recordings. So this is what propped up the whole problem.
And Marine Le Pen leads in the first poll while Macron is in the second position, increasing support for police. France is now beginning to tilt right, and noticeably so. And even the whole of Europe is now starting to tilt right. Sir, before I let you answer this question, I want to tell our viewers that we've had several hangouts with Professor R. Vaidyanathan, I think for the last 3 years or so, and we've been stressing this, that Europe is doomed unless it does something about it. In fact, one of the favorite quotes of Professor RV has been, the average age of a policeman in Belgium is 41, and so is his waist size in inches. Sir, go ahead.
Well, I think the whole propagation, the whole advocacy of this is coming from, you hit the nail, and Professor Vaidyanathan as well, around the constant police attacks. Police are well respected in many of these European destinations, and they find that these attacks come from either communities that have not integrated or new immigrants who have made their way during the Arab Spring or over the period of time, years. So the attack seems to stem from those people. So under these circumstances, one would expect people to wake up. And this is very similar to, defund police versus fund police movement that we have seen, which some states support, some states don't. But by and large, Europe seems to be moving that way. In France, France has taken very strong views and very strong approaches in terms of dealing with these issues, and they have been unequivocal in stating that people must integrate into the value and the culture system if they choose to live in France and follow and abide by the rules. Madame Le Pen is a big advocate, and that is why the numbers are propping up. Macron is also a big advocate, and he is backing up with his scheme. The question, therefore, is Macron a little more global, whereas Le Pen is much more nationalistic? That could be the reason why there is marginal differences in the first and second polling. But clearly, France is leading the way, and many other people are moving towards that type of a mindset in Europe.
And next news is just as interesting. As migrants land in UK, I'm assuming this is Ukraine, United Kingdom and not Ukraine. Italy pushes EU to revitalize scheme to spread migrants across Europe. This is what started the whole problem a few years back, isn't it?
Well, I think the UK is coming up with a much more stringent policy in terms of dealing with migrants. No, this is not Ukraine. This is very much UK. This is one of the underpinnings of the Brexit was, as part of EU, you had to support the broad EU policy of refugee intake, which UK was unwilling to do, given UK itself is inundated with refugees and immigrants and illegal immigrants and so on and so forth. So therefore, as more and more migrants land in UK and gets expelled, because UK has much more stringent policy, Italy is saying, hey, look at UK, what they're doing, and I'm getting a lot of people, by boats into, now we have even Bangladeshis and Sri Lankans and all kinds of other people being, apparently this is now a what you call legitimate, illegitimate operation of carrying all these people in the boat and trying to push them into Italy. So EU is saying, Italy is telling to EU, look, I can't come up with a scheme which allows me to harmonize and normalize this.
And the United States cannot do climate deal with China, who use slave labor to make solar panels, say Republican senators. Well, the whole world has been using solar panels for what, 2 decades now? Why now, sir?
Why now? Because you have to come up with valid and righteous excuses. You tolerated certain principles for a long time, and you allowed this to go. So now the famous words in terms of containing China, China tilted. We saw what happened between 2008 and 2016. The whole South China Sea, Spratly Islands, Indo-Pacific claim for Indo-Pacific Islands, then infiltration into various countries, universities, influencing the academic, political kind of thinking that has happened. So suddenly people say, okay, if you're going to talk about, the human rights in certain countries, well, we have to start with China, and China has got a big human rights problem. We saw that in Hong Kong, but Hong Kong now, you have passed a law in Hong Kong which actually delegitimizes democratic legislative council membership as well as the voice of dissent. So now, the world is waking up and saying, well, let's go to Uyghur and see we have a problem in Uyghur because there's more and more problems are becoming visible. And now, so this is one of the things that is coming up. And China is trying to make a backdoor entry back into the United States, says, oh, well, Mr. John Kerry, I'm very happy to do a deal with you on the climate, but I'll do it on my terms. Now, at least obviously the Republicans are saying, hey, hold on here for a minute. You want to bring them back on the climate deal? And they've violated every rule and every law. And if if alternate energy is the mechanism, they're using, violating the human rights using slave labor to do it. And so therefore it's not acceptable. So that is why it has sprung up to surface. We'll see similar things on South China Sea and democracy and all those kinds of things prop up. But there seems to be a global coalition growing in terms of this Uyghur condemnation.
I look forward to the day when Vice President Kamala Harris leads the delegation to Uyghurstan. with Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and Pramila Jayapal in tow and see the expressions on their faces. It should be priceless. Taiwan restores power after outages hit millions. So, sir, this is now country after country, they are experiencing these outages. I'm wondering which company gave them the infrastructure. They need to be really looking out for the bugs in their software.
But this is the third largest plant. So let me, try to, this is the third largest plant in Taiwan, which is the Sinta power plant, which is in the Cochin province. This operates on both coal and hydroelectric. The plant, which runs both on coal and natural gas power generators, is the third largest power plant. There was a malfunction apparently in the power grid that meant a power plant could not distribute electricity, and that led to multiple power outages across Taiwan. So they're not advocating whether this was as a result of an attack, but I'm sure that in the first instance you don't hear, and suddenly this issue may prop up. There seems to be a pattern around these power plants being attacked around the world. Taiwan is not an isolated case. If it is the case, then one can conclude. So we have seen this in India, we have seen this in United States, and it's obviously probably in a couple of smaller other countries, and then it has come to Taiwan, which is one of the hotspots of the world presently in the global confrontation between China and rest of the world.
Yes, indeed. And in COVID news, the Chinese Communist Party pandemic was preventable disaster. Terrible wake-up call, says WHO Commission panel. Wow, they're calling it CCP pandemic.
Yes, they're calling it the CCP pandemic was a preventable disaster, but it was a terrible wake-up call, says the WHO Commission panel. It's a panel which is basically stating that, and then to say, hey, we still need to work our way, but we could have done a better job. It is a tremendous admission of what the world is facing.
And we are going to show you. We already showed you the data about how COVID has been affecting various countries. So I'm not going to go into that. In markets, producer price index has spiked to 6.2% for the 12 months that ended April. This is the largest increase since 2010. 6.2%. Wow, that's a big number, sir.
It's not a quarter for the year ended April. That means rolling back from May 1st of last year to April 30th of this year, you have seen a producer price index, or what's called PPI, spike 6.2%. It's the largest growth or largest spike since they kept records. We used to have only CPI, but the PPI records were held, so it's the highest spike. One way to look at it is, it's positive, but the other way to look at it is it simply implies that there is a shortage caused by recalibration that is also going on as a result of import substitution that is taking place in the industry. There's plenty of cash available in the system. There is a demand. There's a growing demand for buying some of these, products, and so the producer PPI is up on the run. This does not augur well if it is sustained to Mr. Biden's infrastructure plan and the loose economic policy. We have seen CPI increases. We now see the PPI increase. It'll be interesting to see what happens in the next 3 months. Yesterday, that is Wednesday, the markets kind of spooked. Thursday, the markets came back because we are Friday morning. The markets came back. Let's see how the markets roll out. All the indices were up between 1.1% to 1.4%. The oil also touched $64 and $67 between the Brent and the WTI crude.
Yes, indeed. And that brings us close to today's segment. Stay safe, stay at home, be careful. This virus is not done yet. It's still making the rounds. And I think this is the new normal. I just lost another near and dear family member in India today. And this doesn't seem to stop. People are beginning to get to resign with the reality. Unfortunately, I think we are in this battle together. Stay safe, stay at home. Again, namaskar, sir, and we'll be back again early and bright on Monday.
Namaskar, and my condolences for the loss of somebody who is near and dear, and condolences to all those who have suffered the pain of COVID in your respective families, friends, and other circles. This is something that we ill afford can have. And also, we are dealing with an unknown because all these new manifestations and new types of ailments are relatively new. It's not something that you can blame the people and to blame the government, but I think the world has dealt with it to the best of its ability in terms of. We have seen this. I'm from New York, so we have seen this for almost 8-9 months. The pain and suffering that we experience, and the numbers that we saw last year, and we are all now feeling relieved and happy. But best wishes to everybody, and we hope to turn the corner very soon. And have a wonderful weekend.
Namaskar, sir. Thank you.
Namaskar. Thank you.